Good evening. We're going to have a brief conversation tonight about what we call agenda harmony. This has been a recurring subject that's come up a number of times in the last few weeks in the church where I'm transitional pastor right now, because they are going to be looking for a pastor before too long. And it's one of those issues that if you don't deal with and process the agenda harmonies in advance, what ends up happening is you end up having the potential, great potential, very quickly for disruption, disharmony, all kinds of things can happen. Now, let me give you one example. And if potentially you have some thoughts or ideas, go ahead and key in on that as well. You could just type it in the comments there, and I'll try to address that as those come in. But what we want to look at initially, right off the bat, is the fact that uh, the harmony is real important in a church, obviously, and there are things that we don't even realize can create disharmony. So, when talking to a prospective pastor, and it could be true with an existing church and existing pastor as well, but the reality is there are some issues that could create disharmony almost instantaneously, and the church already knows that, even though they don't present that initially. Because it's kind of a courting process between a pastor and or other staff members and the church. And so we want to put our best foot forward. We want to represent ourselves well, both the church and the pastor, as we begin this kind of courting process. Well, when you look at agenda harmonies, what I recommend to pastor search teams is that they look and research and determine 5 to 10 agenda harmony items in their church that they know if the pastor were to come out and be on the totally opposite side of a particular issue or something in the church, that the church has historically been on one particular side or another, then it would almost instantaneously create havoc. It'd create disharmony without any doubt. So here's the thought. Let's take, for instance, the issue of divorce. Okay. Let's say that the church has a position, a stance historically, that men who serve as deacons could have been divorced. They could have been divorced and remarried, and the church is pretty much okay with that. Well, when they're interviewing potential pastors, if they don't really dialogue about that, if they don't really talk through those issues about the divorce situation and deacons, kind of what they feel, then what ends up happening is it comes back around the fall of the year, whenever they may look at ordaining new deacons or adding deacons to their existing current deacon body. And what ends up happening is the pastor comes and talks to the chairman of deacons or whatever, and he says, well, we need to look at, ordaining some people, and several people have mentioned this person and this person and this person. And the church, not thinking there's any kind of an issue or any kind of a problem, say, well, yeah, I think we ought to talk to them and work our way through that those would be good individuals, and maybe 2 of the 3 could be, elected or ordained. And so the pastor starts moving through that process with the approved process for the church to make this happen. Well, in the midst of that, the pastor says, when they discover that one of these men has been divorced, or I mean, it could go even beyond that. It could be married to a spouse who had been divorced and remarried. I mean, there's a lot of different variables that could include divorce, obviously. And so now the pastor says, now, whoa, wait a minute. I don't believe theologically. I don't believe the Bible allows for that. And the deacon can't be remarried. He can't have been divorced. He can't, whatever his position is at that point. Well, now all of a sudden, without any question mark, we have this contentious situation where now the pastor is saying, hey, look, as the pastoral leader, I'm leading the congregation. I have a responsibility over this congregation to shepherd them well. And this is what I'm teaching from Scripture. And now the church, who historically has done that, looks around and says, well, I don't know what the problem is. Well, now you do have a problem, and tensions rise. And then maybe you look around, and this new pastor or potential pastor, if he's already come by now, he looks around And several of the guys who are already serving say, well, do you realize I'm divorced and remarried? And do you realize, and maybe one or two of them have, come to find out the church has not had a problem with this for a long time. And now you have a very contentious situation where the pastor is wanting to hold to one particular position. And for him, he feels like that's going to be a theological compromise. And that's going to be a real turnoff, obviously, going to be a huge problem. And on the other side, you look at it and see that the congregation is looking at it and saying, no, we're not doing that because we've always felt like this is okay. There's not a problem with this. And so that's a huge deal all of a sudden for them to look at it. And now you have this huge issue. So you can look at a number of different kinds of issues that right off the bat could create disharmony. Several things could come up, but your church needs to think through what are those things. It could be wedding policies, who's allowed to get married in the building. It could be who's allowed to have some kind of a function. They want to have an event in the fellowship hall or whatever. Are there any criteria to that? Do your bylaws specify that? What about somebody from the community who just wants to rent the space and come in there? Well, some of the people may say, well, yeah, if they're part of our community and they have a family member or something and they want to have a birthday party or whatever, in our fellowship hall, that's no problem. They give the $250 or whatever it is, and they go ahead and do it. But on the flip side, what is the criteria? Do they have to be members of the church or do they not? Well, what does the pastor think, or this prospective pastor, if you're just dealing with a guy? What are the issues surrounding the rental of the property? Do they have to be a member? Do they not have to be a member? What about if there's some connection in the crazy world we live in now with a gay couple wants to get married and have a reception there in the church fellowship hall, or some other type of thing that the church, for the most part, doesn't feel that would be acceptable, or the pastor maybe doesn't feel it would be acceptable, but yet maybe some of the members in the church feel like, that's not a real problem. So whatever it might be, those are things you need to look. 5 to 10 is what I always recommend. Agenda harmony items. You want to make sure that your pastor and the church as a whole, are on the same page. They have the same agenda when it comes to this. So it's really, really important that we look at that and that you consider that. Well, that's a brief discussion of agenda harmony. I'd love to do a much more in-depth discussion and maybe bring this up in some of our pastors' roundtables to do that. I think that would be great to be able to do that as well. And so we might do that before too long. But anyway, that pretty much wraps it up for me tonight. I just wanted to do that real brief, just discussion of that, because we've been discussing it a lot here lately as well. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you'll subscribe. Go ahead and click the like button, and we'll give you more news and update and ministry things for your church, particularly that mid-sized to smaller size congregation.